Just about ready. Um, Riley, are you ready to go?
Helps if I unmute myself. But yes, I am. I'm ready to go whenever you are, Kathy.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today for revolutionizing backflow management, a partnership approach to better utility services. My name is Kathy DeGlendon, the Marketing and Communications Manager for Advance. Before we begin today's webinar, a bit of housekeeping. All mics are on mute, and we will have a question and answer session at the end. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat and we will answer them. I have with me today Riley Kirk, the backflow specialist for SwiftComply, who will tell you more about how you can revolutionize, boy, I can't say that word today, your backflow management. Riley, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy. And I appreciate everyone joining here. I'm looking forward to getting into things today. Like Kathy said, we're going to be talking about cross-connection control, compliance management, backflow compliance management, kind of however we want to frame that or look at it. We'll be looking at that through the frame of what we do here at SwiftComply and how that sort of may integrate or work alongside of your, greater billing CIS advanced utility systems ecosystem. And so, yeah, we'll kind of dive in. Like Kathy said, if y'all have questions on anything as we're going through stuff, again, we've saved some time at the end, but if it's relevant, feel free to just jump on into the chat there as we're going through things. I don't want you to have to hold some question towards the end if it's really top of mind there. Make this interactive if we can. Otherwise you'll listen to me talk and drone on for the next 40 minutes or so here, and I'll try not to put y'all to sleep there. So we'll kind of dig on into things. Just to start off, like Kathy said, we'll kind of be talking about the revolutionizing things, and it's a big word, and what does it really means? But for us, it's sort of our approach to how can we create better utility services. We really think that's going to be in line with partnership and collaboration. You'll hear me say that a lot while we go through things today. Just sort of be warned, lots of collaboration, lots of partnership, lots of proactiveness. Those are sort of the things that we see that lead to success, not just when we talk about a cross-connection control or a backflow program, really just in general. I'll step back a little bit. Like Kathy said, I'm Riley. I'm sort of the backflow specialist here at SwiftComply. Wear a number of hats, but over the last 5.5, 6 years, I've been working with folks across the country, helping them launch successful programs. Success means something different to everybody else. So we really try to, work alongside folks to let them reach that desired end state. We do that through a variety of different ways. Whether that's with our software services, our professional services, really anything along those lines. That's sort of the approach we take here. Like I said, been with SwiftComply 5.5, 6 years at this point. So seen a lot, heard a lot while I've been talking to folks like yourselves that are, maybe on the billing side and sort of what they think they might want when we talk about integrations. Folks that are actually running those cross-connection control programs, how you can best use that data and manage things. And so I'll be talking a little bit about our experience that we've seen sort of through that journey and what we're working to build and have built to help folks successfully manage that. I'm based on the West Coast, so I am based in the Portland, Oregon area. It's late morning for me here, but excited to have some folks. And I was looking at the chat there. Looks like we've got some folks from all over. So excited to sort of dig into things here. Just sort of starting out, what is SwiftComply? Who are we? Why are we talking to you today? We are a founder-led software company. So we work in a number of different areas. We work on the wastewater side, doing fats, oils, and grease and industrial pretreatment software. We work doing stormwater, and what we'll be talking about today is our backflow and cross-connection control side of the business. So that face you see there, that's not me. I didn't lose my beard and grow a little hair, but that is our founder there. And one of the things that we think is really important and helps us really stay focused on delivering the best possible services and software to our customers is that we are a founder-led program and company. So that gentleman there, Mick, he founded SwiftComply a little over 10 years ago. He was a water and wastewater engineer himself. He worked in these programs day in and day out, and he said, there's got to be a better way of doing this than, having piles and piles of paper and these huge filing cabinets behind me. Obviously, the software industry as a whole has evolved a lot, especially in the last 5-10 years there. But at the end of the day, our goal is to protect public health and the environment. So that's what we want to do. That's why we build and deliver the services that we do. And hopefully that's somewhat in line with what the folks that are in your water department are hoping to do there. So we try to bring that experience so we can stay focused on delivering the stuff that's important, and focused on constantly innovating so that we can be the best possible product for you as things change, as programs evolve, as all of that happens. So we'll be going through a little bit of some different stuff today, and I will actually be spending some time talking about some specific use cases, which I think will be pretty interesting for y'all to get an idea of, okay, not just talking about it, but what does this actually look like in practice? So first thing, and I apologize to those of you that are the cross connection control specialists that are on there, we'll kind of breeze through this, but just sort of in general, backflow, cross connection, what is that? So from a high level, and you can see my fun little diagram I've got down there in the corner, it's the reversal of flow of drinking water. So we want to prevent it because it can cause contamination to the water systems. And we can do that through a number of different ways: backflow preventers, backflow prevention programs, cross connection control programs. All that stuff really helps us do that. But at the end of the day, it is a required compliance program, and there's a couple of different folks that we might talk about. So typically folks are going to be tracking commercial and industrial facilities. Some folks might be tracking multifamily housing units, might be looking at like the agricultural side of thing, and more folks are looking at residential. So you may have a residential irrigation. In that case, there is a potential for a hazard issue when we do have a reversal of flow, or we do have a cross connection contamination there. And so at the end of the day, folks that are involved in these programs, they have a very important job to prevent this, because there can be a lot of negative impacts from that. How do we prevent it? We talked about this: assemblies, programs, making sure that we're on top of things. A backflow prevention device can really look like a number of different things. I've just got one example down there in the corner, because that's something you may have seen when you're just out driving around in a parking lot around a professional building. That's sort of an idea of what these might look like. Again, that might be a little bit on the larger side there, but that's an example of what an assembly looks like. And we manage and track and run these programs to stay on top of things. What do we do with those? It's going to be everything from surveys and inspection, testing, reporting to state or federal authorities for the effectiveness of the program. And the reason we have designed and built the software that we have, so that we can make all of that easier, allow you to track and manage all of that information. And at the end of the day, be proactive with it. There's a lot of data that is involved in this program, in this information. So letting you centralize that information, centralize that data, and then go ahead and track things effectively moving forward. And not just effectively, but proactively. We want to stay on top of this and be proactive with it. If you're running a reactive program, you're dealing with things as they arise or as issues occur. We want to prevent those issues. We don't want bad things to be happening. And bad things can happen. There's a reason we have these programs. There's a reason this is so important. And it can be everything from down there at the bottom, oh gosh, we have the sewage hooked into the water system, so there's a boil water advisory in effect. That's one side of it. The other side of it can be serious injury and death. People can unfortunately pass away or contract severe illnesses if there is a cross connection, if there is a contamination of the water system. So we want to do everything we can to prevent that. And an effective backflow or cross connection control program is really going to be that first step in doing that. There's a lot of things that come into that. Obviously we're talking about the software side of it today, but there's the people side of it. There's the management buy-in, so that they believe in this program, fund it, and give you the tools to be successful. We'll be talking a little bit about what some of those tools are today. But at the end of the day, this is a critical program for cities and water jurisdictions to be running. And there's a whole greater ecosystem here. It's not just folks that might be on that water quality team or that backflow team or the cross connection team. There's a lot of other folks that might be involved. Obviously, one of the very important pieces of that is going to be the billing side of things. Those folks that are maybe using CIS and are involved in that day in and day out. And we see a lot of value in the flow and sharing of information between those systems. We'll talk a little bit more about what that exactly looks like and how we can share that data in a minute or two here. But it's really that cross-team collaboration, the sharing of data. It allows everybody to be more effective. We talk about a lot of data points being involved in a cross-connection control program. When we widen that scope and talk about these other teams, that's even more pieces of data. So, how can we be effective with that? I think a lot of times, and I am a culprit of this myself, I have piles of Excel spreadsheets and different softwares I use. And sometimes I think almost, it's like, okay, I have data, but just for the sake of having data. It's not really actionable. It's not really effective. And there's some ways that we can get on top of that. There's some ways that we can really turn that around and say, okay, I have all this data and it allows me to drive my decision making. It allows me to stay on top of things so I can do what's important. Recently, and I think this is sort of some interesting tidbits, we did a survey of hundreds of water professionals across the country. These were not just folks that were using SwiftComply. These are folks that are on Access and Excel databases. These are people that are on other software systems or might be trying to use the software in a way maybe it wasn't intended, but trying to run things. And these were sort of the four major things that we heard them saying. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. This also isn't necessarily stuff that's super specific to the water quality and protection industry. And a lot of this is true across all departments and sort of all areas when we think of things. Number one, obviously, is budgetary pressure. There's more and more regulations, more requirements going into place. Costs of things are going up, unfortunately. But while that's happening, a lot of folks are seeing that budgets are staying the same, or they may actually be having those budgets being reduced. So it's how can we be more effective with less resources? Again, there's a number of different ways we can do that. And we'll sort of be digging into that as we go through things today to talk about, how can I stay on top of things? As budgets are changing, so is the workforce. So you have folks retiring, you have, folks that are moving into the industry. And this can be sort of a tough world to attract people to join. So what a lot of people are looking for right now is, ways that they can incentivize folks. And, we talk about budgets going down. So that sometimes isn't always higher pay. There might be other things that we want to incentivize folks to be joining the industry. One of those ways is systems that are easy to use, easy to learn, and something that they're used to looking at. So, if we come to maybe a younger professional and say, hey, you should come join our team, they start asking about tools you're using and you tell them about, oh, we have an Access database or all these Excel spreadsheets we're using. That might not speak to them as much as if you can say, hey, we have these, modern tools that we are using that are innovative, and driving change and really easy to use. And so that's why it's really important for a company like us at SwiftComply or for our friends at Advanced Utility to be delivering these, softwares that not only do a lot, but are also user-friendly and easy to use. When we talk about, being innovative moving forward, we also talk about those evolving regulations. Things change. State level, federal level, there's new regulations that come in place. There's new things that water systems need to do to be compliant and keep up to date with those regulations. And it's hard to evolve and change with those, especially if you have maybe a software system that's a little bit older, maybe it doesn't have those, abilities to configure and adapt. You could say, we were great 5 years ago, but we're really doing a lot of workarounds now to kind of keep up with the reporting requirements that we have or the surveying and hazard assessment regulations that are in place now. So you really want to be able to keep on top of that. Again, a lot of things that people are saying is, hey, I need a system that's going to evolve with me and change with me. And at the end of the day, obviously we run these programs to protect the water system, but we really want to be able to improve relationships along the way. And I think this is a big place where a successful partnership between, for example, your cross-connection control software and your billing software can really be beneficial, is because you may have that source of truth, that information on your water customers and their information on the CIS side. And then on your water side, you want access to that information so you can do better outreach, so you can help folks understand why you're doing what you're doing, so you can send them reminders and updates. The more transparency you can provide to folks, at the end of the day, there's going to be more success because they know what's going on and what's happening. And I kind of look at these four things as maybe, the top things we're hearing, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg. When you dig deeper into it, that's where you find there's so much more going on. And there's a lot more that we can do that folks are looking for and wanting to, improve upon moving forward. And so again, it's finding a system that's not just going to, allow you to utilize and address these areas, but everything else that you know about, or maybe there's things that you don't really know about or don't know how to quite put into words, but you're looking for improvement. And that's kind of that bottom of the iceberg, right? It's a little bit more hidden. It's kind of under the water. It might be a little dark and foreboding, but we want to be able to, address everything and build adaptable systems so that we can come across these things as they come up and address them effectively moving forward. So that kind of plays into how can we help? What does SwiftComply do? What does AUS do? How can we go ahead and address that? So I've got my fun little diagram down here at the bottom. It gets a little technical, but really at the end of the day, it's the facilitation and sharing of information, right? So for example, if you had a partnership agreement with SwiftComply and AUS and you're able to utilize both these systems, and again, this is really going to speak for a lot of other things. There's probably other software tools you use in your job that you think, the more data sharing we can have, that would be better. But in this instance, we want to have that for that up-to-date information. The big complaint, or one of the big complaints I hear from folks running a cross-connection control program is they have out-of-date information. So, when you run a program, you may send out a couple of test due notices to your water customer to remind them, hey, you have an upcoming test that needs to be performed. Well, if you don't have up-to-date contact information, up-to-date addresses, emails, phone numbers, who the water customer or property owner is, it's going to be very difficult to get those notices out. The last thing you want to do is maybe you're sending out some letters or sending out some emails. You don't want to get that failed to deliver email back or a pile of returned mail. Then you just went through all this effort to send out notices and you have to restart again from scratch. So that's one of the big benefits that folks do see from a connection between these systems is just that up-to-date information. So you can go ahead and be confident when you're doing your outreach that we have the most recent details. Again, it's very common that information is going to be kept up to date on a more frequent basis on the CIS side. You're probably not going through and doing that all one by one on your Backflow side, or if you are, it might be a very manual process where you have to actually go into CIS Infinity, pull that information up, and bring those details over. Again, we want to eliminate as much of that manual data work as possible so that you can focus on the stuff that's actually important and actually driving compliance in programs. So once we have those up-to-date contact details, again, that plays into our collaboration in our education and sharing of data just more effectively. It also means we can be proactive of what is out there that maybe we don't have information on. A very common thing is you may say, hey, I have a pretty good inventory of what's going on with my Backflow program here, but there's locations where we don't have visibility into that. Well, guess what? If we have a good connection between those systems, if we can share that data, you can get visibility into, hey, here are all of these locations that, our water customers have water connections set up that we don't know if they have a backflow prevention assembly or not. We don't know if they even need one. They might not have one, but they might need one. They just don't know they need one. So if you have that awareness, you can go out, you can perform inspections, surveys, hazard assessments, see what's going on at that location, and then go ahead and make recommendations of, oh, you're fine. We don't need you to install an assembly, or, you do need to install an assembly and we can kind of get you help on what that looks like. Or, oh, you already have 5 assemblies out at this location. We didn't know that. We need to go ahead and, set up a regular testing schedule for you so that, you can make sure that the water system is being protected from your side, and we can kind of educate you on how to do that. So, it goes beyond just the basic high level stuff. It's really making sure that we can drive that compliance. And, if you were able to log in and get a list within your system to see, hey, here are the 15 locations that we need more information on, guess what? You just built yourself a list of folks that need to be surveyed or looked at. So instead of going out and blindly running around town and trying to find, who needs to be looked at, you can kind of dig into that a little bit more closely and be more, effective in the folks that you're going to look at. And so we've been talking a little bit about here, okay, these are the benefits to folks on the water side of it. There's also benefits to folks on the billing side of it, on the customer service side of it. We want to provide some value and some benefit to them as well. And again, by having a flow of data going back and forth, we can. Let's say a water customer calls up a member of the customer service team. They've got some questions about, some stuff on their bill or what things are looking like. If that person has visibility into what is going on in that location just within their CIS view, great. They can not only answer their questions, but they could also say, "Hey, it looks like you have a backflow test report that is due to be submitted in the next 2 weeks here. Were you aware of that? Have you performed that? Have you gone ahead and hired a tester to go ahead and look at that for you?" Again, it's just more ways we can share that information. We can get in front of them, and we're providing a great service to that water customer as well at the end of the day, because maybe they weren't aware of it. Maybe they've been getting these letters in the mail, and I'm getting 50 letters in the mail today. I'm slow to go through it, or it's like me, it creates a pile on your desk, and then you just don't want to look in that direction because it's overwhelming. Well, great. Here's another way we can communicate that information to those folks. So there's a lot of value in being able to share that information back and forth. And a connection like this one between SwiftComply and between advanced utilities is going to be mutually beneficial for everybody. Again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, it's that collaboration, it's that data sharing. It's giving you all the information you need so you can be more effective at the end of the day. And you're hopefully not getting bogged down in that manual data entry. You can be effective in the things that are likely actually in your job description, being boots on the ground, performing inspections, educating water customers, providing great customer service to folks that are connected to your water system. So those are some of the high level things that we see of huge benefits between having a system like this, having system integrations between things. And I want to go ahead and kind of dive into this a little bit deeper as we kind of talk about how this flows in actually some real life examples. So this graphic here, if you've talked to me in the past, you've probably heard me either talk about this or show it. This is the extent of my graphic design, which is basically a circle with a few pictures. I pasted into it. I'm sure somebody with, more experience in Photoshop or something can make this look a little bit prettier. But to me, this is the circle of collaboration. Like, this is why I do what I do. This is why SwiftComply builds the tools it does. And this is why a lot of people do what they do, is because we can hopefully help make your job more effective by providing that transparency and that flow of data. So, over here on the left side, we're kind of talking about the Backflow team, the cross connection control team, the water side of things, giving them a system that has dashboards, alerts, notifications. So when you log in, you can immediately see the important information for you. Or you might be able to get notified outside of the system through email notifications or things like that, so that you're not going into a system, parsing through lines and lines of data and trying to find, who's past due, or who haven't I reached out to, or what do I need to do this week? No, it's front and center. You know what you need to do because the system is set up to sort of direct you and your activities in a way that's going to be most effective. But we're going to be even more effective if we can connect in with those other folks. This goes back to what I was just talking about, that connection in with the billing team, being able to eliminate those data gaps, eliminate that, manual data entry. The last thing you want to do is have somebody who's almost full-time job is going through and one by one updating things. Like, no, they can be effective doing so much other stuff. Again, we go back to, budgets being reduced and, staffing levels dropping. Great. Let's allow people to be really effective with their time, and let's automate or remove some of these, manual tasks that, might already be in place. And then the final piece of this sort of flywheel in this puzzle here is the third party folks, the water customers, the backflow testers, all of those folks. So by having up to date information, by having insight into things, we can go ahead and send out test due notices, reminders, educational materials to those water customers. They can go ahead, hire backflow testers if tests need to be performed. And then we can actually open up a place where those testers can submit those results directly back to you, providing visibility to you on the jurisdictional side, providing visibility to themselves, their water customers, and making things easier. I talk to people who are getting test reports via, letter, via fax, getting them dropped off at their office. And then you have to take that, enter that into the system, maybe take a scan of it and, attach it alongside it. no, let's cut out that process as much as we can. Let's give the testers a place where they can easily log in, access information, and submit that data for review. And we can go ahead and set up compliance checks along the way. So the system can verify, I don't know, PSID values coming in. Are they in line with what we're expecting? Is that useful information? Can we go ahead and have a system automatically review things for us and then point our eyes at maybe those test reports that come in that are, non-compliant, or there are issues with them? Maybe there's a discrepancy, stuff like that. So again, let's remove that manual data entry side of it. Let's accept that digitally. And then we can go ahead and take action based off of that information, what the system's flagging up, what we're seeing. We also want to provide value to those testers. It's a easy to use system for them, but it's a point of record keeping for them as well. So, they don't have to deal with their process they're using, whether that's, probably an Excel spreadsheet for a lot of those folks. Maybe it's, some billing system that they use that they've tried to sort of, jerry rig into tracking backflow compliance tests they've done. No, by doing this, not only do they have a place to easily submit stuff, benefit to you on the jurisdictional side, but it's also providing value and ease of use to them. So they can use that to see, past tests they've performed, update their credentials. So you can keep track of tester certifications, test kit calibrations, anything like that. Again, just sharing that information back and forth and making it easier for all those stakeholders along the way. And so what does this actually look like in practice? So I've got two examples here of some folks that are using our system and sort of what they've seen. And I want to look at it through two different lenses, because I think there's two different areas for success here. So we want to set you up for success off the bat, right? We want to have a successful implementation. From there, we can talk about what it looks like from an ongoing basis. So this is an example of a city that we work with in Indiana. And the gentleman that runs the program there, he had been burned in the past. He had some bad experiences implementing software, not necessarily his Backflow software, but some of the other systems that he's used. And I'm sure some of you can relate to this. I've gone through software implementations where I buy something, I'm all excited to use it, and then it takes forever, or it's a poor experience, and then you lose all that momentum. You're no longer excited to use the system. And something we really pride ourselves in is those services we provide on top of the software. You can have the best software in the world. If you don't have help setting it up, if you don't have help on an ongoing basis, it's going to be tough to use. It's going to be tough to, have that continued success using the system. And so for us, and in this example, for the folks at the city of Greenfield, the implementation was one of the big reasons why they were able to be successful moving forward. And the first part is, that historical data. You want to be able to be set up with not just the system, but your historical activities and records. And by, working with them, we were able to fully transfer over all that information. We were able to quality check it so the data wasn't funky, it populated into the right places. And there was really no disruption on sort of that flow of compliance. You don't want to say, okay, we bought the software and we want to implement it, but they said it's going to be 6 months. My gosh, it's going to take forever. We have to put our whole program on hold. It's like, no, let's see if we can do this in a much quicker time frame, and let's not put things on hold for you so you can continue to run and have an effective program. And one of the ways we do that is through a phased rollout. So we don't just dump everything on people at once. We'll sort of set the system up. We'll bring over that data, set it up for testing so folks can get familiar with it, work with it a little bit more closely. As that's happening, we can start to sprinkle in that training so they can get that hands-on training in a testing environment. They can also work with, their trainer that they're set up with to go ahead and help them get a feel for the system. Again, everybody learns differently. I am a hands-on learner. Some people learn more visually, and some people are auditory learners, so they want to hear it. So, we try to approach it from all aspects of that to, give everybody a full level of comfort as they're getting trained in using the system. And, at the end of the day, we want to set that up so that the data is not only brought over and populated in to avoid interruption, but also allow that access and collaboration across departments. So the sooner we can get things up and running, the sooner we can integrate into other systems that are being used, the better they can go ahead and share that data. So, really, it kind of boils down to a couple of important things, but it's not just speed. Obviously, that's a big part of it, but the effectiveness during that process. Is the data being brought over? Is the data being brought over well? Is there training provided? Am I being taught how to use the system so that, I'm not only going to be successful from day one, but as things come up over time, I kind of know what I'm looking at and what I'm doing. So those are some of those areas we really look at and say, okay, if we want to be ultra successful with an implementation, we're going to provide you with those services so that you can, from day one, be an effective user of the system put in place. Again, this isn't just specific to a SwiftComply setup. This is really something that should be true for any systems you purchase and put in place. And I would challenge you, if you are evaluating software systems, ask them what that implementation process looks like. And the easy one that people do is how much time is it going to take? A week, a month, a year, whatever that looks like. Great, but what's actually being done during that time? Like, what services are being provided? What's going to be asked of me on the water provider side of it? What am I going to have to do? Am I going to get a ton of homework, and is the onus going to be completely on me? Is the software company I'm purchasing, are they going to be playing into this and helping me along the way as well? What does that process look like? So, I would say if you are looking to purchase any softwares, like, challenge the person you're working with from that company to provide you with a scope of what's being provided. If they aren't able to do that, or they're uncomfortable committing to that, I would say you should be thinking about, okay, like, this is an investment we're making. Where is that money going? And I think there's a fear out there of, oh, I might be paying too much for something. There's a nice balance there. If you're paying for something, you should be able to say, okay, I want to hold you accountable to these things that you've promised and you've said you would deliver with our system. So we really see if we can set things up in a successful manner, and that's why we allocate the resources we do towards that, assigning different folks and different human resources and systems to allow that process to go smoothly. The more effective that's going to be at the end of the day. Yes, definitely.
Data format, Excel, Access, etc. Can you work with for initial implementation?
So what like data format for that initial implementation? Is that's the question we're looking at there?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so I mean, there's a variety of different ways we can work to bring over data. Our preferred format is going to be like an Excel or a flat file. The good news is you can typically pull that out. If you have an Access database, it's really easy for us to go ahead and pull data out in a similar format. If you're using another dedicated system, same thing. Most modern systems, we're going to be able to pull that out in that CSV, Excel, flat file format. And in the cases where we can't, there's usually a workaround that we can get to go ahead and pull that over. And so that's part of our process. So if you decided to work with SwiftComply tomorrow, you'd be assigned an implementation manager, you'd be assigned a data engineer, and then there's some other folks that you would run into along the way. For example, our integration specialists if we're setting up the integration with CIS and Affinity. But those are the folks that are going to be able to say, okay, where's your data at now? Here's our desired end state. How can we work with you to get there? So that might be pulling out an Excel file, doing some reformatting and quality checking before it's loaded into the system. But especially with a lot of states that have requirements of, you need the past 3 years, 5 years, 7 years of historical data. If we can, we want to be able to bring that information over. Again, it also lets us be more proactive on a go-forward basis then, because you have that historical information. You can see trends, you can make adjustments and decisions based off of what has happened in the past. But yeah, that's sort of our preference for data migration and information. And I would really say, if you think that you aren't able to get it in that format, it's probably worth a conversation with us. We've worked with a lot of different systems for data to be brought over from. And in, I would say, just about every case, we're able to get that information in the way we want it to. Sometimes, it might involve getting your IT team involved or one or two things like that to fully pull out that information as needed. But once we have that, it's a pretty easy process rolling forward from there. But short answer, yeah, that flat file, Excel, CSV, anything like that is kind of where we want to jump off from. And if you're using, like an Access database, for example, it's a relatively simple process for us to get that historical information. Is that the only one, Kathy?
Yeah, that's it right now. And Darwin says
Perfect.
thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. And on that point, Darwin, like if you have any specific thoughts on that, again, you can always reach out to us and we can go through like the specifics. But I would say it's probably something that's pretty easy for us to help you with, or you can probably do that yourself. So again, that all plays into the successful setup and implementation of the system. Beyond that point, we're going to be using the system. You might be using it daily. Some folks maybe use it, 3 days a week or something. Again, it kind of depends how you're set up, how your program's running. But what does ongoing success look like? So it's that ongoing success, that ongoing collaboration. And at the end of the day, we want to drive compliance, right? Like we want to set this thing up so that you have a safe water system, so you have a good grip on what things are being looked at. So this is an example of DeKalb County down in Georgia. Very large water system. DeKalb is one of sort of the counties that encompasses and surrounds Atlanta and some of the surrounding areas there. So when they moved to us, they were looking for a number of things, but the big thing for them was saving time. And we've talked about reducing manual data entry and sort of manual administrative work. They were able to eliminate 80 hours a week of that work. Again, very large program, so that sort of plays into that. But you can imagine if you have thousands of backflow assemblies and you're getting paper test reports that then needs to be manually entered into a system, an Excel spreadsheet, whatever. But you're also dealing with keeping contact information up to date. You want to be able to send out test due notices on a regular basis. Well, if we don't have that information, it's going to take time for us to find it. So again, they were really happy. I mean, literally were able to free up 2 people to start doing some other stuff that they desperately needed attention with, because they were able to free up so much of that administrative work. And again, everybody runs their program a little bit differently, but the way DeKalb was doing it was literally getting paper copies of test reports, taking that information, entering it into their system, and then doing a scan and attaching that test report. Now they just accept a digital copy of that test report directly. They can ask that tester to take a photo of the assembly of a physical copy if they're filling that out. So it's all captured and included in one place. The system can review that, check for any errors or issues, and then actually flag it up to the DeKalb County team so they can say, okay, we had 100 test reports submitted this week. Here's 20 that need a closer look at it. The rest look good. I don't need to spend my time reviewing those as closely.
And if you look at that 80 hours a week, you've eliminated two weeks of work for 2 people, like a week of work for each person. So that really does save on if you don't have enough people to do the jobs that you need to get done, and that frees other people to do what they needed to do, the other high priority jobs that they have.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the big thing is, people look at this and they say, oh, well, that's, going to eliminate the jobs of 2 people potentially. In our experience, that just means those people can go and help out in the areas that do need that extra assistance. Or more likely, there's other areas of your cross connection control program that need assistance and help. So great, let's free up their time to do effective work instead of just look at sheet, enter data. It's probably not the most stimulating of work for them, but B, there's always areas that need extra assistance, especially when we talk about municipal governments, and especially on the water side of it. There's always people begging out for more resources, more help. Let's allow folks to reallocate that. Let's remove that administrative work. And a big thing with that is not only can we remove that administrative work, but we can increase reporting accuracy. I don't know about you all, but if I am looking at taking something on paper and entering it into, my computer or something, especially as time drags on, like the eyes start to wiggle a little bit. You're looking at a number. Oh, is it this or is it that? If you're like me, terrible handwriting, I can't even read what I wrote half the time. So, I'm entering this, and is that an 8? Is that a B? What the heck was I putting down there? So, by having this information in a digital copy, you're able to, remove a lot of those issues because, again, it's typed out. It's type form. You're able to see it and enter that data, or have the system enter it directly for you. Likewise, and the testers that I've worked with in the past, they're out in the field. They might be scribbling this information down. So, their handwriting might not be the best. There might be some, water involved with things. It could, water stain on the piece of paper they're working on. Again, if you give a tester the tool where they can be in the field and they can access on a phone or on a tablet that information and directly input it from there, not only are you making their lives easier, they don't need to haul around that paper and clipboard and then go ahead and send it back to you at the end of the day, but you're making your life easier. You can quickly see and read those values that are being input and captured, and then you can have the system actually review that information where there gaps, was additional information needed. Is this flagging up a compliance issue because the PSID value on the second check valve was about above the maximum allowed limit? So you really are able to increase the reporting accuracy of things. And you get that real-time feedback that you're able to give to your testers, for example. So they can see that information, capture it, turn around and say, okay, there's an issue here. I need to clean this device and retest it right away because I get that immediate feedback. Or, oh, this form isn't letting me submit it because I haven't filled in all the required fields. Great, it's going to take me directly there and say, yeah, you didn't say if you cleaned or repaired this device. Go ahead and enter that checkbox as needed. So increase accuracy while also giving those testers the ability to do that right from where they are on site. It also gives, if you're out in the field doing a survey, hazard assessment, anything like that, gives you the tools to see that information on site, input those details. You have a digital survey form where you can input that information. You can pull up past history. So you might be out on site doing a hazard assessment. You can go ahead, review that information, see what was done in the past, maybe see recent test results. Hey, has this device been cleaned recently? And find out exactly what's there. So you can then, take that as well as, input new information. Again, it's all about making things easier, streamlining that workflow, whether you're on site, whether you're receiving data from the testers, allowing yourself to be more effective. In the case of DeKalb County, very large water system that really let them cut down on some of the difficulties they were facing and let them be more effective in actual on-site review of locations. And finally, they're able to take the system that they had implemented, and we implemented them about 5 years ago. Guess what? Things have changed over that time. Their personnel has changed, state regulations have changed. So they're able to take the system and adopt it and adapt it to do what they need to do, whether that's making tweaks to current workflows, whether that's, adopting an entirely new workflow entirely twice there. But, it allows them to kind of change and evolve with time, whether that's internal change or external change, giving them that system that adapts to them throughout the process. It's really allowed them to be more effective, and it's allowed them to raise their tester satisfaction. The end goal is not just to make your job easier, but all the stakeholders. So there are those testers that need that assistance, that want an easy tool. We were able to deliver that on behalf of the county, and they, not only are getting better data and more accurate data, but they're getting really positive feedback from their testers who have said, hey, you've actually made my life a lot easier. You've provided me with that assistance. And, I am a tester and I have a question. I actually have somebody I can reach out directly to now. I have a phone number and email, the ability to chat into somebody through the system instead of, scrambling all around, maybe going to the county and, they can't provide me assistance right away or something. We want to make their job easier at the end of the day. And a modern tool like this, allows you to do that and stay up to date as things change. So, at the end of the day, and this kind of blaze off of that last point I was mentioning, we want to build not only the best backflow program for now, but also for the future. So, we've taken the expertise, the feedback from our hundreds of customers across the country to build the solution that we have now. And we're constantly innovating and iterating that to make it better. So that's taking, feedback from folks and developing new features and functionality based off of what, people are asking for. It's going ahead and being able to adapt to new regulations. If you're in California, you most likely know about those new, cross-connection control policy handbook requirements that have gone into place and are going into place over the next couple of months here. It's having a tool that they can use to adapt to capture the information they need to go ahead and report back to the state effectively and easily. Again, things are going to change. We want to be able to change and adapt along the way with you. And, we talked about having data for data's sake, but let's be effective with it. Let's use that data to drive decision making, to drive change, to make educated decisions about what's going to be best for all of our water customers, and stay on top of things so we don't need to worry about issues with water quality or cross connection control failures in the future. We can kind of see those warning signs ahead of time and address them before things arise. And finally, last time you'll hear me say the word collaboration today, I promise. We want to have that open collaboration. So that could be collaboration between software systems, between SwiftComply and your CIS Infinity. That could be collaboration between you and your water customers, you and other teams and departments within your jurisdiction. The more effective we can be with that, the more data we can share, the more transparency and education we can provide. People are going to buy into this. They're going to know what they need to do. And at the end of the day, you're not going to find many people that are against protecting human health, keeping people safe, and making sure that we have great drinkable water that's going to be clean. So let's share that data. Let's share that information among parties, among different software systems, so that we can achieve those goals at the end of the day of having safe water systems while also delivering a quality service to folks and making people happy along the way.
You have another question.
Please.
And it's related to the fee structure. So Dara was
Yes.
asking, what cost can we expect from the water utility side and or the customer/tester? And it doesn't need to get into the dollar amount, just ongoing fees and to maintain the service.
Yeah. So you talk to different companies out there, people have different viewpoints and approaches to this. Again, this kind of goes into our flexibility side of it. We try to stay flexible. Some folks will charge the tester maybe a fee per passing test that's submitted in order to have zero annual costs to the jurisdiction on their side of it. And we can do the flip side of that, where we say there's no cost to those testers to use the system, and there's an annual fee that's maybe paid by the city, for example, to help fund things. So there's a couple of different ways we can go ahead and set that up. You're going to know your testers, your water customers better than we do. So we want to be able to work with you to come up with what makes the most sense for everybody. And if you're interested in more specific numbers, you can see my contact information up there on the screen now. Happy to talk through some of those details and be able to give you an idea of what something like this might cost or might look like for yourself.
And Jacob asked, how does your software track or inventory all of the devices? We currently use CIS billing, and Backflow are assigned a device number, and said device number is assigned to a particular account. The annual testing is tracked that way within CIS.
Yeah, so it's not going to be entirely dissimilar, but you would be using a purpose-built system. So it's going to be able to capture and sort of have that information for you. So not only can you capture those different devices, you can have their make, their model, their testing schedule, and then use that to drive notifications. So you could send out automated communications based off of your testing schedule and test due schedule. Maybe I send a first test due notice out 45 days ahead of time. Great. You can use that information that's captured to then have the system go ahead and generate automated emails, send out letters based off of that. And you can have everything, assigned with a particular type. So again, if you have a fire line, which is different from a domestic, customer or domestic assembly, you can have all that information captured within there to visualize the information. And then you can use all that for reporting purposes. So if you need to pull a report of all of the domestic folks that have not been tested so far this year, you have the data captured, you can quickly report, filter, and view that information. And then, maybe go ahead and use that to send out information to folks to remind them of their testing schedule. So I would say it's, from a high level, it's a data tracking software. You can capture all of that information there, have device numbers, serial numbers, all that stuff assigned. And then you can actually use that identifier as a source of truth to share information back and forth between systems if you need to.
So another question is, what is, some of our customers may be on the AUS Backflow system. So what is the difference between the AUS Backflow program and SwiftComply? What benefits would you see if you switched from one to the other?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is really going to be like it's a purpose-built solution built by experts within the field. The built-in system in CIS Infinity, it does a lot of great stuff, but there might be some areas where, that's one piece of a bigger puzzle. We've designed our system to really do everything from start to finish and everything in between that's involved in the running of a cross connection control program. And that can be everything from capturing hazard assessments, collecting test reports from folks via a tester portal, and sending out notices, to just basic reporting, filtering, capturing of information. And let's say you have a state report you have to submit, and we can help you actually generate that within the system, so you don't need to go through and gather all that data. You can just go ahead, click two buttons, and have the system generate that information for you. And again, it's one thing for me to say that. I do think seeing is always believing. So if you do have an interest in seeing exactly how that looks, so you can compare it to what you're doing right now in your CIS system, please feel free to reach out. Again, you can see my contact information that's up there as well. Happy to find time to give you a point of comparison between the tools, so you can get an idea of, is this something that would actually be useful to explore further.
And so what are the biggest benefits customers see from using the SwiftComply Backflow program?
So it's really going to be, effective data management. By having that purpose-built tool, you can capture the information and you can share that with folks. So we talked about being able to automate communications going out, being able to accept information from a backflow tester through the portal. That's going to cut down on a lot of time, allow you to have more accurate information, which at the end of the day is going to lead to accurate state reporting. It's going to lead to accurate general reporting, so you can go ahead and be proactive in your decision making. And those are some of the major benefits that folks see from the system. And the last thing is the assistance along the way. You can always reach out to us and work with our team. It's not like there's a cost for additional training or assistance hours. These are experts in the field who provide support, and they can share, not only what they might recommend for your system, but also go ahead and, share what's been effective for other folks. I think, is there another question that came through there?
Yes, Jerry is asking, do we need to have the backflow data configured in CIS beforehand, or can it all be in flat files or access data DB? I think that's database.
Yeah, so great question there, Jerry. And really, flat files is a great point to start there. I wouldn't say, hey, go in and do all this work in CIS beforehand. Like, if you have flat files, we can take that and we can kind of work with you along the way to do things. And I think another one just came in from Brent that popped up there with Lee Summit. So yeah, recently went live with SwiftComply, slow adoption rate of the backflow testing community, and some data issues on the manual test inputs that require intervention. Yeah, so a couple of things that are being worked on. Well, I'll talk to that first point there. So obviously slow adoption rates. Testers are their own entity in their own world. And yeah, sometimes you have some folks that are more adaptive to change than others. From our side, it's being able to provide them with that information and that training to go ahead and get them used to it. Unfortunately, I can't sit here and say, oh, if you, have SwiftComply, all of a sudden 100% of your folks are going to be using the system. We usually do see that ramp up year over year with time as folks get familiar with it and get that training done. And so, we're always sort of working on innovating that and trying to make that a better experience for those testers involved. But, you kind of hit the nail on the head with that point there, Brent. It can be slow to adopt at first. So, what can we do to take advantage of the folks that are using the system? And then what can we do to kind of, get those folks that aren't, or maybe slower to adapt, to utilize the system? And again, that's, just through different trainings that we can provide, different educational materials, we can provide that from there. And your account manager should be able to help you out with that. Again, if not, feel free to reach out to me on my contact information there, and I can go ahead and, sort of establish those details for you on that side. And then on your second point there, with the data issues captured on some of those manual test endpoints requiring that correction, like, again, we talk about at the end of the day, we want to remove those manual connections and information. So a couple of things that we're working on. We're working on a more seamless connection with CIS Infinity, so that whether you're on V4 or V5, some of those folks are maybe still on V3 out there, you can have more of an automatic data sharing back and forth. And I know that's something that's being worked on, and we're pretty excited to get that finalized and launched here soon. And along with that is, how can we avoid those manual, those corrections that have to be made to that, those manual test inputs. So it's not just configuring the system to track and view that stuff, but giving you the tools and giving you the assistance to go ahead and do that. And I know there's some changes that have recently actually gone live, maybe within the last week within our system, that should be able to play into that a little bit more closely. Some things we've released with our administrative review panel there. And so, I would recommend you to go ahead and explore that, see if that, is able to help out, because I do think that would be a big benefit. And then, on top of that, it's just, continuing to use the system, get used to it, and then, allow us to kind of come in and help out with some of those more automated setups that I mentioned a second ago.
That is about, we're at the top of the hour, almost at the top of the hour. Yep, right now it's the top of the hour. So we'll go ahead and say thank you, Riley, for joining us today and telling us everything about SwiftComply and how it can help our customers with backflow management. And just want to remind everybody, if you're going to the Central User Group or the Southeastern User Group, you will be able to see Riley and his team there. We will also be at IUCX next week in Phoenix. So if any of you are attending, please reach out to me. We've got some great things going on. We'll be at Top Golf. And we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to come and visit with us and see what we have that's new and exciting. And also get a chance to have some fun at Top Golf too. So